If the New Orleans Saints want to prove that they can be a competitive team in 2024, they're going to need a fast start. We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, Ross Jackson, your New Orleans Saints expert, credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints as a senior writer and reporter over at Saints News Network, and of course, New Orleans native. On today's episode of Locked On Saints, we're going to take a look at how having a late bye week can make a major difference for the New Orleans Saints in 2024. We're also going to take a look at their three most important games, including the first game where they have a real opportunity to prove something. And to get us all started, we're going to outline why the New Orleans Saints need a fast start if anybody is going to be convinced that they can be competitive in 2024. We appreciate you very much, as always, for making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day and for being an everydayer here on the Locked On Saints podcast, which is a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. In today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Make every moment more right now. New customers can get $150 in bonus bets by winning any $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets with one $5 winning bet as your first bet. Head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. We're going to talk more about FanDuel here a little bit later because we're going to go through a couple of odds for the New Orleans Saints, or really one odd for their, what their spread is to open up the season. But to get us started here today, I want to kind of drive home the idea that the New Orleans Saints must have a fast start to this season if they want to immediately compel anyone into believing that they can be a competitive team in 2024. Now, I know I say that in a way that sounds a little bit maybe dismissive. I'm not trying to say that they aren't compelling people, but if they really do want to compel everyone, a fast start would go a long way. Now they're going to open up the season against a familiar opponent, although things are a little bit different when it comes to the Carolina Panthers now, but they'll open up against the Carolina Panthers at home, comfortable, right? Nice to be home to open up your season again. Now it's a new look Carolina Panthers team, but it's a little bit more of a depleted team talent-wise than what we saw last season. Unless Bryce Young, the second-year quarterback that the Carolina Panthers traded all the way up to the number one overall selection in the 2023 NFL draft to select last year, didn't really pan out his rookie year. But if he takes a lot of big steps going into 2024, then all of a sudden the team looks very different. But the likelihood of that happening with a new coach, new head coach, and Dave Canales, who, don't get me wrong, has done some really nice things with quarterbacks throughout his tenure, especially what he did with Baker Mayfield last year, was great. But is that going to happen with Bryce Young? I don't think that what you saw with Baker Mayfield particularly can give you the confidence to say, okay, yes, you can replicate that with a Bryce Young that doesn't have a Mike Evans, that doesn't have a Chris Godwin, so on and so forth, right? So I think that there's something to be said in terms of how the different scenario is still very present. So the Saints can come out and maybe immediately build some momentum to start the season up against the Carolina Panthers. Not a problem. They're right now, even with our friends over at FanDuel, having just put the odds up, favored by 4.5 points at home going into that game. And so you think about a 3-point swing in their favor because they're the home team. And that's still a 1.5 point favorite. So still favored even in that scenario. So that game you feel pretty good about, but you need that game because your next two games, you're traveling to Dallas to take on the Dallas Cowboys, a very good football team. As much as I hate to say it, it's a very good football team. And then they travel back here to New Orleans so that they can host the Philadelphia Eagles here in New Orleans. Again, a very good team, a very talented team. Now, a few of our everydayers have made a really nice point around all this, which is that NFL teams don't typically play their starters throughout the preseason right now. So with that being the case, it does kind of put the Saints in a situation where they might be able to sneak up on a couple of really good teams early on and take advantage of the fact that they're not in rhythm yet. But in order to do that, the Saints have to be in rhythm themselves. Because remember, they have a new system that they're implementing, new play caller that's coming in on the offensive side of the football, an entirely new coaching staff, at least position coach and offensive coordinator wise, with the exception of tight ends coach Clancy Barone. So there's a lot to kind of figure out, right? Not impossible, not a tall task by any means, but definitely a lot to sort of solve when it comes to the New Orleans Saints. So getting maybe a little bit of a boost in that by being together all training camp out in Irvine. They're going to, travel together. They're going to eat together. They're going to hang out together. They're going to practice together. They're going to study together. Like, that's going to kind of, we hope we're looking at it and going like, okay, well, I could see how that could be helpful for this team in terms of being able to be a little bit more cohesive right off the bat, which is something that took the Saints a little while longer to do last year, about 12 weeks, before they really felt like they were in rhythm. If they can get into that rhythm early, then that's really the thing you're looking for in the fast start. I really don't care about the record through the first 3 games. They could finish 1-2, but if they look good doing that, then we're talking about it a different way. Now, would I feel better about the team if they were 2-1? Yes. Would I feel better about the team if they were 3-0? Naturally, that would be the case. But those are going to be tough games against the Dallas Cowboys and against the Philadelphia Eagles, who are going to be healthy to start the season, barring any injuries in training camp and things like that. But it's early on in the season. Everybody's feeling good. Everybody's body's as right as it can be during that time. And so those are going to be challenging games. But I do respect the idea that those could be preseason games for other teams. And so it could be really important for the Saints in terms of their fast start to really be all about Derek Carr's fast start, really be all about Klint Kubiak's fast start, really be all about Alvin Kamara's fast start, right? Getting these guys a part of the system, getting the run game going early and producing in a way that it couldn't and didn't produce last year, getting that play action game more involved right away, getting motion involved right away pre-snap to help your quarterback out. All of those things will kind of help, for lack of a better phrase, move the needle for the New Orleans Saints early on. So when I talk about them having a fast start, I kind of don't really care about the record. Like, can you sneak an extra win in there? Yeah, sure, that'd be great. That'd be awesome. Because if you can get a win against the Dallas Cowboys or against the Philadelphia Eagles, that helps you later on down the line, especially with them being NFC opponents, in terms of your playoff positioning, in terms of your playoff implications later on in the season. We saw last year, and I mentioned this in the schedule breakdown, schedule reaction episode, which you can go back and check out here on Locked On Saints as well. But I mentioned that the week 3 loss against the Green Bay Packers, that was kind of the death knell of the New Orleans Saints season. They just didn't know it until they got to the end of the year. So dropping, or rather winning a game that you don't expect to win, or that, let me say it this way. Winning a game that many won't expect you to win, because everyone's going to pick the Cowboys. Everybody's going to pick the Eagles in those games. They're favored. The Eagles and the Cowboys, the Saints are underdogs in those games. If they can steal one of those wins, that might be the reverse of what happened last season. So instead of them missing the playoffs because of an early loss, perhaps they're in better playoff positioning because of an early win. So there is value there. But really the thing that I want to see is this team just be cohesive, particularly on the offensive side of the football, to see the system working, churning. Doesn't have to be perfect. You can get better throughout the season, right? There's got to be room to grow. But figuring out sort of where you're able to step on the right foot, right? Tyrann Mathieu talked about this before. The only thing that you can do is make sure you're putting your best foot forward and take your step with that foot. And I think that that's what the New Orleans Saints will need to do early on in the season in order to convince anybody that they're going to be a playoff team. Then after that, it becomes about winning the most important games. And I'm going to give you 3 of their most important games, including one that happens in the first 4 games against a bitter division rival. We got that coming up for you as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel, our official sports betting partners here on the Locked On Podcast Network. And you know it's winner take all season right now in the NBA as well as in the NHL. So FanDuel is giving you the opportunity to take home a big win of your own as well. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets by winning any $5 bet as their first bet. It's that simple. You come in, sign up for an account. Your first bet, you put down $5 on a heavy, heavy favorite, and you immediately get 30-1 odds, because if that $5 bet wins, you get $150 in bonus bets that you can then use on spreads, player props, money lines, and so much more, including even taking a look at the New Orleans Saints 2024 season, betting on some of those games. Again, the Saints favored at home, -4.5 up against the Carolina Panthers. So maybe something you can get in on with some of those bonus bucks as well. So if you want to get started, and I highly recommend that you do, you're going to want to head over to FanDuel.com/locked-on to get started today. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, family. Not only do the New Orleans Saints need to get off to a fast start in 2024, but they have 3 extremely important games that they absolutely must win in 2024. And it all begins with a bitter rival, week 4, those dreaded Atlanta Falcons. We appreciate you very much. As always, make it Locked On Saints your first listen of the day, every day. Don't forget to also go and check out the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 stream, the first ever national sports 24/7 stream available on YouTube entirely for free. So instead of listening to all those other networks where they're all yelling and screaming and arguing with each other, come over to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube, or you can also find it on the free Amazon TV Fire Channels app as well. And just get the biggest stories from the people that know the teams the best. So go and check it out today, Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and on that free Amazon Fire TV Channels app. So for me, the Saints have 3 very, very, very important games, the most important games, in my opinion, in 2024. And I'm going to say something that's going to sound very controversial. The Kansas City Chiefs are not one of those games. That's just simply put. It's an AFC opponent. If you lose that game, you lost the Super Bowl champions. If you win that game, you beat the Super Bowl champions. That feels really nice. That feels good. Don't get me wrong. But if you lose that game, you lost the Super Bowl champions, and you lost to an AFC opponent, which doesn't impact your tiebreaker formulas and things like that as dramatically as losing to an NFC opponent. So you can have some breathing room there. So that's why I take Kansas City Chiefs off. For me, the first game that is the most important is week 4 at Atlanta against the Atlanta Falcons. The second game to me that is the second most important, believe it or not, is week 9 against the Carolina Panthers. Yes, it's a noon game. It's in Carolina. All the other stuff I'll explain in just a little moment. And then finally, the next one for me, and this one maybe you're looking at it as week 16 later on in the season, all of this stuff, but it's the Green Bay Packers. Right? That Monday Night Football game against a team that you're probably jostling for playoff position with at this moment if you have a winning record. So those 3 games to me are the most important. I'll explain why in a moment. I do want to give a quick honorable mention, of course, that Denver Broncos game, right? Just because of the emotional side of it. Again, it's an AFC opponent. If you drop it, it doesn't really matter. But if you drop that game in particular, it totally matters because it's against Sean Payton, who effectively walked away from your team and then ended up joining with the Denver Broncos. So I would understand why that one would be high up on somebody's list. I'll give another honorable mention to the Rams game, week 13 as well. Not even honorable mention, just that those would kind of be in my top 5 most important games. But because we're trying to talk about top 3 here, that's where I'm going to go. So why the Falcons to start? First of all, there's going to be a little bit of a bad taste in the Atlanta Falcons' mouth in this 2024 season. Remember the last time the Saints and the Falcons played each other? First of all, the Saints won handily. But secondly, you had the Jamal Williams rushing touchdown, the kneel down that wasn't, all those things. So there's going to be a little bit of bad blood here going in. Now, Arthur Smith is gone. The whole conversation and argument between Arthur Smith and Dennis Allen, that's not going to be a factor any longer. You've got a guy in Raheem Morris who Dennis Allen very much respects and very much respects Dennis Allen, all those other things. I would like to see these 2 coaches and these 2 organizations play back into the rivalry a little bit. It felt like they kind of started to do that, and then it ended with Dennis Allen apologizing to the Atlanta Falcons and Arthur Smith, which of course drove a lot of people crazy. But I'm hoping that maybe we'll see a little bit more of a lean into this rivalry, especially seeing kind of the fun stuff that the Saints have been doing on social media here recently. They've kind of been leaning into their own jokes and all this other stuff. So hopefully maybe we'll see a little bit of that in 2024. But even beyond all that, I think that this game against the Atlanta Falcons, week 4, if you win week 1 against the Carolina Panthers, kind of allows you to establish an early assertion of you being the best team in the NFC South. You haven't played the Tampa Bay Buccaneers yet, I know, but the Atlanta Falcons are the team that's going to be credited as being the most improved NFC South team on paper, right? That's what you're going to hear all offseason long. And in fact, the New Orleans Saints are very likely to walk into this game against the Atlanta Falcons as underdogs, road underdogs. On top of that, especially if they drop those games against the Dallas Cowboys and the Philadelphia Eagles right off the bat. So the reason why I think that this is a really, really important game for them is all of that emotionally charged stuff that I mentioned, but also like this is your litmus test. Where are you? Like, where are you in terms of your development as a team, your development into your new system? Week 4, have you gotten it right yet? Are you a little bit more kind of in line with what it is that you're wanting to produce offensively? Will it take you just 3 weeks to get there? Like, this is a really good litmus test to kind of see how you're performing against a veteran quarterback in Kirk Cousins, how you're performing against a talented roster with the Atlanta Falcons skill position players, how you're taking advantage of a defense that maybe still has some growing to do, and how you're taking advantage of your offense, your scheme. Where are you in terms of your identity? Do you have one? The New Orleans Saints did not feel like they had an identity at this point in the season, going up against a bitter rival that has made some major changes, that have made some changes that are similar to the ones that you have made, and that people will be talking about in a similar way. Can you show that you have already built your identity, and can you prove that that identity is better and bigger than the competition that you most immediately have within your division? That to me is why the Week 4 game against the Atlanta Falcons is incredibly important early on in the season. Now, I picked a bit of a shocker here, and this is the one that I expect that like you might be like, Ross, what are you doing? But hear me out. Week 9 at Carolina against the Panthers. Why would that be a top 3 important game? This is, and I could lump week 10 against Atlanta in here too, the home game against Atlanta. The reason why I choose either one of these two games is because this gives you an immediate ability to be able to compare yourself to who you are now versus who you were to open the season. Right? So if you're the Saints and you had a nice win against the Carolina Panthers, let's call it 17-7. Okay? Let's call it 17-7. No. Let's not even go that far. Let's go 17-13, right? You had a 17-13 win over Carolina to start off the season. Once you get to week 9, and that score is 28, 21, 35. You know what I mean? Like, and you're up in that area of scoring, you've proven something. You've proven that against an even control, right? Carolina Panthers, assuming that there's no big injury that separates week 1 Carolina Panthers from week 9 Carolina Panthers. You have gone up against a team that is better in its rhythm because they played 8 games by the time that you have played against them. That carries similar talent from week 1 to week 9, and you have shown that you can perform better. It's a good comparison. It's a good control, basically. And so that's why I think that the week 9 game, or you might say the week 10 game against the Atlanta Falcons, are really, really important as well. And then finally, the Green Bay Packers. Week 16, 2 days before Christmas, Monday Night Football. Okay, national stage, opportunity to establish yourself, especially if you have a winning record at this point. Opportunity to establish yourself on a national stage to say, we've arrived, right? That's the stamp that you're trying to put on Lambeau. Now, you also have to show that you can win in a winter, snowy, cold type of condition, which you're going to have to probably play in potentially, depending upon the seeding of the playoffs, if you make the playoffs. So it gives you a little bit of an opportunity to say, hey, we did that. Gives you that. You got the Giants 2 weeks before that. If you win that game too, you're kind of proving the same thing. Hey, cold weather, not a problem. But then also it allows you to kind of be in a situation here to where you're separating yourself from a team that might be jostling for playoff positioning with you. This game should have, if things are going well for the Saints, major playoff implications in terms of seeding, going up against an NFC opponent that's probably hovering around the same place that you're hovering around, whether it be playoff conversation-wise or record-wise. And so that's why I think those 3 games are particularly important. And again, I'll throw the Broncos game in there. I'll throw the There's the Rams game in there as well in terms of top 5, but that one's coming off of a bye week. Like, it's a pretty comfortable situation there at home, yada, yada. And then, of course, that Raiders game is in there too, but that's really more about Derek Carr than it is about the team. But I think, if the team rallies around Derek Carr there late in the season, I think that tells you something as well. So those to me are the 3 most important games for the New Orleans Saints. Please let me know what you think the 3 most important games are, or 5 most important games, like I gave you, for the New Orleans Saints are in the 2024 season. Coming up next, New Orleans Saints are sitting on a bye week, week 12. And I think it's kind of perfect. I'll tell you why as we continue on and wrap up today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Passion, drive, and patience, all the things that you're looking for when it comes to a formula for winning championships are all the same things that will keep your ride or die alive as well. And over at eBay Motors, they have everything that you need to be able to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, whatever it is that you're looking for, eBay Motors has you covered. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, you're going to be able to find what you need. With over 122 parts and accessories for your number one ride or die, you're going to be able to get exactly what it is that you're looking for. And with eBay's guaranteed fit, it's guaranteed to fit the first time, every time, or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. So go and check them out today, because with eBay Motors, you're going to be able to find every part that you need at the price that you want, and they're going to make it super easy for you to level up your car to that MVP performance and start bringing home some huge W's. So keep your ride or die alive today by heading over to ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay guarantee fit available only to U.S. customers. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. The New Orleans Saints have their bye week, week 12 this season, the week before Thanksgiving. And I think it's kind of perfect for them because of the way that their schedule is structured. Let's break it all down. We appreciate you very much, as always, for being here. And don't forget, we are your team every day. So we'll be back here on Monday with a brand new episode to make sure you're all covered with all the biggest stories from around the New Orleans Saints. And don't forget, we are coming up on OTAs. Media is going to be out there. We'll have access on the 21st, on the 28th, and then into June as well. So we'll have some pretty cool stuff that'll come from all of that during those OTA sessions, and getting maybe just an opportunity to see not just the rookie players like we saw during rookie minicamp and the fresh faces and all that, but some of the veteran players that may or may not show up too. Don't forget, those are voluntary. They're not necessary to be there. So look, I think that the Saints having a bye week at week 12 is actually really solid for them. If we look at the way that their schedule is broken out, and I know I mentioned this in the schedule breakdown episode, but just in case you missed it, weeks 1 through 8 are particularly challenging. That's where you have games that are going up against the Dallas Cowboys, the Philadelphia Eagles, the Kansas City Chiefs. You have that emotionally charged Denver Broncos game. You have a tough Chargers team, Jim Harbaugh led, just Justin Herbert led, all that. That's going to be in those first 8 weeks. Then you get 2 division opponents and then a hapless Cleveland Browns team. Lord knows who the quarterback's going to be during that time. And you get to this bye week in week 12, the week before Thanksgiving. And then that leads into a home game against the Los Angeles Rams. But I want to focus first on just sort of the positioning of this bye week and the convenience of what's here. You get to play 2 familiar opponents ahead of the bye week, the Carolina Panthers and the Atlanta Falcons. Then you go up against an opponent that you've played here recently, but you don't necessarily know everything about, because there are a lot of things changing for the Cleveland Browns. Who will be the quarterback at that point, whatever. That's a team that might be hapless by the time that you roll into week 11, or they might be really, really good by the time that you roll into week 11. But no matter what, it's going to be a knockdown, drag out kind of a situation, right? You've either got Jameis Winston revenge game going on, you got Deshaun Watson coming to town. In any case, the New Orleans Saints should be supercharged, to borrow from eBay Motors, to go into this game. But it's going to be a tough one. It's going to be a very physical game, especially if Nick Chubb's healthy. You got to be able to stop the run game, and they're a very physical team with that Kevin Stefanski offense and the way that offensive line plays with a lot of aggression, a lot of physicality. So you're going to get beat up against the Cleveland Browns. Like, it wouldn't surprise me to see like an injury or two in that game that's maybe not necessarily like severe, but the kind of ones that maybe like you got to come out for a little while and then maybe you kind of go, oh, well, thank goodness the bye week's there, kind of a thing. I think I like the positioning of this week 12 bye week because you see kind of the bell curve of the NFL that happens with injuries and things like that, to where, and really it's kind of a reverse bell curve. It's kind of a dip to where you kind of go early season injuries, then things kind of settle in a little bit, and then you see a spike of injuries again towards the end of the season. And then you also see offense go the opposite way, to where you see offense kind of start off a little bit flimsy and then pick up for the beginning or like kind of like the middle part of the season, and then come back down and kind of level off at the end of the season when defenses are able to start adjusting to it. Injuries take place on the offensive side, all those other things. So having a week 12 bye week kind of allows you to be able to go back to the drawing board for a second and then kind of clean some things up based on health, based on your offense being adjusted to. So how do you counter that based on what you've seen over the course of the past couple of weeks, especially going up against teams that you'll have then played for the second time in the season, the Carolina Panthers and the Atlanta Falcons. Like, there's a lot of diagnosis opportunities right before that bye week. Then you get the bye week to tinker, futz, kind of zhuzh, you know what I mean? Like, mess with the offense a little bit and kind of disguise it a little bit more, or change a little bit, or you know, this tendency that we've been setting up all season, here's where we potentially break it. Like, those types of things. Like, those are the pieces that you kind of get to pick around with during the bye week and all that. And then you come off of that bye week, by the way, home, which is nice, against the Los Angeles Rams in a late game, in an afternoon game, a 3:05 central kickoff as opposed to a noon kickoff. So I think that helps too. It gives you a little bit of extra time. And you going up against a scheme that you've seen a bunch, a scheme that you didn't adjust super well to last year over on the defensive side, but that you found a way to adjust to on the offensive side. And now you're running an arguably better offense here in 2024. So I think that like that gives you the opportunity to kind of fine tune just in time for that Rams game. And again, that Rams game, just like the Packers game that we just talked about, is really important. It's really important because that's another one to where you're looking at probably jostling for playoff positioning, right? You could be looking at the Rams as the number 2 team in the NFC West, and the Saints is the number 2 team in the NFC South, or the Saints is the number 1 team in the NFC South. And then the Rams and 49ers duking it out for the first, you get what I'm saying, right? In first place in the NFC South or NFC West. So it gives you an opportunity here to maybe get a win over a team that you might need to otherwise need a tiebreaker against in order to get into the playoffs later. And one of the other things that I mentioned in the schedule breakdown episode is that this NFC opponent heavy schedule towards the end is kind of in the benefit of the New Orleans Saints. I mean, over the course of weeks 9 through 18, they have one AFC opponent, and that's the Las Vegas Raiders, which again, you're going to be supercharged about. But what it means is that every game after that week 8 game of the AFC opponent against the Chargers, those are going to be games that are going to mean something. One correction. Sorry, there's 2 AFC games from 9 to 18 because the Browns game is in there as well. But after that bye week, where you've had a little bit of time to tinker after what you've learned going up against the Panthers for the second time, going up against the Falcons for the second time, and then going up against a little bit of a more unfamiliar opponent in the Cleveland Browns for the first time, and then you kind of see, okay, well, here are the things that we kind of need to adjust. Boom, you get into the bye week. Then you come out of the bye week, and then you've got Rams, NFC, Giants, NFC, Commanders, NFC, Packers, NFC, Raiders, AFC, Bucks, NFC to close out the season. So that's why I love the positioning of this bye week, because it kind of serves as, we mentioned week 4 kind of being a little bit of like a get right potential game for the New Orleans Saints if they drop those games against the Dallas Cowboys and Philadelphia Eagles weeks 2 and 3. That bye week kind of gives you an opportunity to be like a real important maintenance week to get you ready for what becomes the most important stretch, but also manageable stretch, not most manageable, but a manageable. Well, this might actually, no. That might be the most manageable stretch of their season is after the bye week. So that compounds it as well for me. I love where the bye week is for the Saints this season in particular. And so that's all the ways that I think that bye week helps you out. I think it's perfect. I think it's perfect for them. Now let's see if they're able to take advantage of it. All right, y'all, we appreciate you very much as always for making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day, every day. For your second listen today, make sure you go and check out Locked On Pelicans with Jake Madison, Locked On LSU with Caroline Fenton, and check in with the rest of our friends over at Locked On Louisiana. Thank you very much, as always, for making us a part of your day, a part of your routine, for saying yes to me and the show. As always, if you see me, please say hi. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you living. Let me know how you momming them. And trust you, that nation. I'll holla at you.